All right, now the moment you've all been waiting for. This time we are looking at the Airpods Pro by, you heard it, by Apple, the company that is, incredibly popular and frankly sometimes a bit overrated, but not always overrated. And that's one of the biggest points of this review over here. Before we start, I just want to say we're still an audiophile channel. We're not going to be turning into like a truly wireless mainstream consumer audio channel or anything. We're still running dynamics and planars and electrostats and the audiophile stuff, and even some, monitors and subs, what have you. But I noticed that a lot of reviewers and a lot of the fellow audio reviewers on YouTube were saying that, hey, you might want to take a look at these. They'll actually make you look twice. They're actually not as bad as you think they might be. It's really worth taking a look. So I said, you know what, fine. I haven't been in the wireless audio market in quite some time. So, hey, why not? Let's take a look at these. See how good they are. See if Bluetooth audio really has improved that much as the years have gone by. Funny enough, actually pulled the trigger on these, and then literally the day after, Zeos comes out with his review, and he's like, oh, these are great headphones, and they're fantastic, and like, wow, these are actually surprising, and wow, you should get these Dekoni audio Bulletz because they improve the experience so much, and it's a night and day difference over the silicones. And I'm like, well, I'm already at it, I may as well just go ahead and get these as well. I'm already on it, may as well just jump into it. Now with that, let's begin. Before we jump in to the actual earphone itself, let's go ahead and start off with what it comes with. So obviously it comes with the AirPods Pro themselves, which are in here. You open up the box and you end up getting the manual, which comes with all the, warning, don't throw these in pools, don't, do weird stuff with them, obviously. Comes with the cable, Lightning to Type-C, which is pretty interesting. But, if you're not an Apple user, this is kind of the worst scenario, and you're going to have to be carrying around an extra cable. Not an extra wall wart, thankfully, because if you're using a more modern charger that has a Type-C towards the entrance to the wall wart, then you can just go ahead and carry that extra cable. So you got two cables and one wall wart. You've got the silicone tips right here. Here I've got the medium and large, even though the medium will come pre-installed in the on the AirPod Pros, and the small and large will be right here. So we got all of that. That's about it. No Apple stickers included with this product, by the way. So if you were hoping to get some Apple stickers, which I don't know why you would, but if you were, they're not here. They are not here for you. Let's start off with the build. So the build on these is acceptable. By the way, these already have the Dekoni Bulletz. These are those right there. The stock tips are actually white, and they look all right. They look very in line with the look of the AirPod Pros. But the Bulletz, in my opinion, kind of add some definition and contrast to it so that it's like, white with the black grills and the black sensors and then the black bullet ear tips. So it's pretty nice. Anyway, the build on these is pretty much what you'd expect from like a typical AirPod or EarPod. This is made out of plastic, not necessarily like cheap plastic, but it's acceptable. I really don't think you would complain about the quality of this plastic, especially given the fact that it makes it more lightweight and easy to use. So, what else? The case itself is also plastic, the same type of plastic, but the hinge is actually all metal, as you can see right there. And if you open it up, and if you try doing this, okay, that was probably a little too harsh. If you try doing this, yes, it wobbles a bit, but it's not so bad. It's actually a relatively, pretty decent hinge, honestly. As long as you're not like treating these too roughly, it's not going to fold over on you. So the pods themselves feature an in-ear type of design as opposed to their predecessors. They feature an in-ear type of design as opposed to the predecessors, the original Earpods and Airpods, which are more of like sit right next to the cavum of your ear, and they don't really go in. They stay kind of right at the edge, depending on who you are and how big your ears are, how deep your ear canals go. They feature grills, which is where the microphones are located right here. And more on that later, by the way, as far as like how the features, what kind of features they have, that kind of stuff. More on that later. They also have quite a bit of sensors which detect for various functions. So that pretty much does it for the build quality. Let's just jump into tech. As far as tech goes, these things are running Bluetooth 5.0. That means you're going to be getting just about the latest and greatest that Bluetooth audio has to offer. As far as LDAC goes, I mean, no, these aren't running LDAC, but because, that's a Sony thing. So they're not going to be as high quality and as, high resolution audio with the bit processing and stuff like that. They are IP68 water resistant, which means that you can take them for light rain, like workouts, and you can use them in light rain, that kind of stuff. They'll be pretty useful and they won't die on you unless you straight up submerge these in water, or if you're out there in the middle of a hurricane, then yeah, probably these will probably die on you, but other than that, you'll be fine. They pair easily with Apple products, no duh. But they also pair quite easily with Android products or any other Bluetooth product. The process for those is pretty much the same as the process for any other Bluetooth product. All right, now we begin with, let's go ahead and hide that. Now we begin with the pairing process. We open it up. It has been unpaired, so this is technically not like straight out of the box, but you press and hold it, the icon will start blinking, and you head over to your Bluetooth settings, and you go down here to, I don't know whose daddy is that, but should start looking. There they are. They're still aptly named Airpods Pro. Yes, pair. And that's it. It's done. Fast. With an Apple product, however, it is so much easier to do this because when you initially receive it, all you literally have to do is just open the lid up. It shows up on the home screen and it's like, hey, these things aren't connected to anything. Do you want to connect? You press connect. And then it tells you like double tap here to skip a track, then triple tap to rewind and that kind of stuff. So the setup is especially easy on Apple products, but it's not too confusing or convoluted on Android or Windows or any other Bluetooth product either. As far as their features go, these things do quite a lot, honestly. And for their price, they should be. They should do a lot of things for their price point. If you squeeze once, they play and pause. With Apple and Android, universal. Twice to skip, universal. 3 times to repeat or rewind a track, that's also universal. You can squeeze and hold for ANC or transparency mode, that is also universal. However, if you wanted to use these without any sort of processing at all, meaning no noise cancellation, but no transparency mode so you can hear the world around you, there's only a neutral mode on Apple. On Android, you're stuck with one or the other, unfortunately. And as far as bringing up Siri or some sort of assistant, that only works on Apple. On Android, you require the use of a third-party app to make this work, but quite frankly, I don't use the assistant on either iOS or Android, so I don't really care for that, and I didn't need to bother with that. As far as getting these to play from one side only, some people have said that it doesn't work on Android, but I tried that, and yeah, it works perfectly fine on Android and Apple products equally. So what happens is if you end up taking one out of your ear and putting it back in the box, back in its case, you'll have them like disconnect for like half a second, and only one side, the side that you're using, will reconnect and continue playing the music. But it's not like completely seamless regardless of what platform you're using. But I mean, I guess that's just one of the gripes that comes with a truly wireless earphone type of product. So as far as automatic play pause when removing them goes, that's only on iOS for sure. I can confirm that. As far as Android goes, they'll continue playing if you take them out of your ears. The only time they'll automatically stop is when you go ahead and remove both from your ears, or remove whatever earbud. You put it back in its case like so, and you just straight up snap the lid shut. Well, I don't think you have to snap the lid shut. The case will detect that the earbud is inside the case and will stop playing music eventually. But I mean, if you take them off, you're pretty much going to just close the lid. So there's that. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's jump into the sound of these. How do these things sound? I mean, after all, they are an Apple product, right? So you might want to, well, I mean, they are an audio product above all else. So you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, you know, cool, this is a cool tech product, but if they sound like garbage, why would I bother using these? Well, I'm glad to report that these actually don't sound like total garbage. Or, well, let me be a little more neutral here. They don't sound like garbage. They really don't. These have actually kind of impressed me, honestly. So let's start with the bass on these. Unlike, well, we'll jump into comparisons in another video, but the bass is actually very respectful and pleasant to listen to. I would say the mid bass is on the neutral to thin-ish side of things, yet very well represented. Like, I'll give you an example. Bass guitars. I can hear bass guitars are well pronounced, but they're not thick and meaty, but they're well reproduced and pretty decent texture on them, honestly. Now, here's the thing. When you start reaching lower into the bass and you reach the sub bass, this is the area where you're like, wow. I mean, these have surprisingly great extension for what they are. I mean, there's a nice rumble without ruining or overbloating the bass, nor bleeding into the mids, which is quite impressive, honestly, for a tiny, truly wireless Bluetooth earphone by Apple, no less. The company that is, like, you know, in most people's eyes, like, overrated, and just like the reason they're so successful is because, oh, it's Apple. Well, yeah, it's an Apple product. Yeah, buy the Apple product, obviously. But I'm glad to report that that's not really the case here. The Dekoni Bulletz, they might emphasize the bass response just a bit. It might be a mind trick, honestly, but it's just a bit of emphasis. But it definitely provides way more control and stability to the bass. I really, really enjoyed that. And I think it's something worth noting there that, yeah, Dekoni Audio, their Bulletz changed the sound a bit, but I want to say for the better. Definitely for the better. Ultimately speaking, they provide excellent punch and slam without being overpowering while keeping south of being overly warm. Yeah, as far as mid-bass goes, it's definitely not warm. But sub-bass, yeah, it approaches the warmth area. But honestly, I don't consider that warm. I consider that more of like just, it's a powerful slam. That's kind of what I really like, so. I'll give you an example. 1 minute and 26 seconds. Zealots of Stockholm. That bass note is somewhat emphasized, somewhat warmish, but it never towers over vocals or sound effects. And it has a very decent amount of detail to it, like that grain that sits on top of it. It has very interesting detail as far as that's concerned. Now, another part of that track, at 3:07, you have the bass note dipping like a roller coaster heading into a valley and then heading back up. At that point, there's very good texture to it, but it does disappear somewhat early. So you can tell that these things, like, they don't have like incredible extension or anything, but they are very good. Good, not great as far as extension goes. But in terms of quantity, they are very well represented. I would definitely call these a professional sounding bass response without being too professional, without being too neutral. I do want to note though, on iPad, the music may have sounded slightly more echoish. And I noticed this particularly in the track Which Image by Ghost, which has background vocals and has the, I don't want to say synth, but has the, the keyboard. I'm not too familiar with the keyboard and like, its type of like brethren, but essentially you have a keyboard playing in the background and it goes almost unnoticed. But I could have sworn those background vocals and that keyboard just pop out a little bit more, and you just kind of make it sound a little more echoish in a good way. The vocals sounded a tad more open and angelic as far as my ears were concerned. There's just slightly more punch in the kick drums on iPad. I don't know of Apple products in general, but the iPad, at the very least, the iPad that I own made it sound that way. So I don't know if it's going to translate into other Apple products like iPhones and stuff like that, because, their chips might be a little different, but take that as you will. Another example, Dream On by Postmodern Jukebox. Well, did I just say Jukebox? Interesting. Dream On by the Postmodern Jukebox, their cover. On the quieter moments, the string bass can be a bit overemphasized, honestly. But it's really not so bad. It's quite frankly, I've heard worse. That's just one of the tracks where it's kind of like, yeah, this slight bass emphasis here could be a bit of a disadvantage, but it's not a deal breaker nor a game changer in any way at all. Now we jump into mids. The female vocals, I want to say they're slightly recessed or closer towards the center. They really don't pop out as much as one would really expect, or as far as neutral is concerned. Once again, Dream On, Postmodern Jukebox. Cannot speak today. Dream On, Postmodern Jukebox. The female vocals are more in line with the instruments and easier to listen to. And the details are slightly glazed over. The way I can kind of describe the vocals are like, let's say you've got the raw product, right? You've got the female vocals right there. And then you just grabbed a little, like one of those cooking brushes, and you added a thin slab of glaze on top of it. Like not thick, just little thin little blanket on top of that. And that's the product that you're getting. So it's not the roughest. It's not the most raw. It's not the plainest. It's not the most detailed, but it does add a bit to the lushness of the vocals in a good way, for a more comfortable listen, in my opinion. Now at 231, the cello solo. The cello has decent detail to it. That's really all I can say about it. It didn't impress me, didn't blow me away, but it wasn't terrible. It was okay. Now, male vocals suffered slightly more than female vocals. It had more of that glazed effect to it. So just to confirm here, Sicko Mode by Travis Scott is slightly easier to listen to on these because of that slight recession in the vocals right there. But they're still too sharp and forward, just because of the very nature of Sicko Mode. It's just recorded like ass, but these make it a little less ass to listen to. Let's jump into the treble here. Generally speaking, I would describe the treble on these to be bright. Not terribly bright, but forward for sure. The highs are very well represented while staying mostly sibilance free. The S's and the TH will be right at the brink of sibilance, like right there. Sibilant tracks will cross a tiny bit. We'll cross that border a tiny bit, but darker tracks will not come close to it at all. Darker tracks sound very, very crystallish. Not very crystallish. Darker tracks have a slight more crystal effect to them, while the brighter tracks are, right at the border of being too sharp, right at the, just just enough to say, my goodness, these are enjoyably sharp, but no more than that in like 99% of cases, frankly. It strikes a good balance, honestly, between hyping the treble for, just because it's a more of an enjoyable sound signature, and control. My goodness. It's a good balance between hype and control, but I would definitely not describe I would not describe that treble as neutral, though. Good control, but not neutral. There is definitely some roll-off that occurs in the treble, but it occurs quite high up in the frequency response. Overall, it almost maintained its smoothish highs. It's so close. If you see the like a chart, let's say you've got it up there and it's a decent, very good, well-controlled treble, a little bit of a peak here and there, like a tiny peak. And it goes far and then it's just down and out. It's just gone. Generally speaking, the treble is just slightly elevated with very minimal peaks, but very decent extension. So there's that. Now, before we continue into the conclusion, I do want to point out some quirks and notes that I noticed while listening to these. Initially, when I got these, I was using the firmware 2B588, and I went ahead and checked that on my iPad. So they play seamlessly and with low latency on Android. I switched over to iPad, and I experienced some skipping within, the iPad was within arm's reach, and it experienced some skipping with it. On Android, the left pod swapped to transparency and back for some reason, even though I had it set to ambient noise cancellation, active noise cancellation. And in the background, you could have heard a slight hiss. Now they're running 2D15, by the way. They're no longer running 2B588, but I'll get to the differences in that in a bit. On Android, I took them out of my ears for about a minute, and when I put them back in, they weren't playing anything. So they appear to have, they weren't playing anything, honestly. So on Android, I took them out of my ears for about a minute, and when I put them back in, they weren't playing anything. I don't understand. Honestly, I don't know why. I guess they have a limit. At some point they just disconnect automatically, but take that as you will. Now, I went ahead and did a range test on these, and I know I should have included this in the tech section, but whatever. So the range on iOS was about 40 steps in a straight line with no items or obstacles in my path. It was 40 steps. And this was tested on 2D15, by the way. Now, I tested the same thing on Android, exactly the same test, and it was 15 steps, not 40. That was really surprising, honestly. That was kind of pathetic, and I had never noticed something like that before because sometimes I went to the kitchen and I left my phone in my room, and it didn't lose connection at all. So that was kind of surprising, through walls and stuff like that. It didn't cut off, and then all of a sudden I'm outside and 15 steps later and it's gone. It was just a weird thing. So generally speaking, I don't notice it. I don't think it's such a big deal, and I really don't think it's going to get in the way of most workouts. The only time I could ever see that somewhat being an issue is let's say if you're playing basketball and you're putting it on the side, on the bleachers, and the bleachers are on one side of the court, meaning closer to one net over the other, or right behind the net. And then you're going to the other side of the court, then you might be noticing some cutoffs. Now, as far as the soundstage and imaging goes on these, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but as far as soundstage and imaging goes on these, the soundstage is honestly, I keep on saying soundstage for some reason. Sound stage on these is decent. It's not too wide, but it's not too narrow either. Generally speaking, I wasn't impressed. I really wasn't impressed with the sound stage, but I guess they do pretty well considering they're a tiny, closed, Bluetooth earbud that is wireless. So I guess they do pretty well in that regard. I'm just saying, generally speaking, used to, as an audiophile, the sound stages I'm used to, It's all right, not impressive, whatever. And the imaging is somewhat impressive for what they are. It does a pretty decent job for a wireless earphone. I will say that. They definitely don't compare to some audiophile product like, HD600s or the Philips SHP 9500s, but of course, those are an entirely different audio product for an entirely different. They function way too differently to compare them like a one-to-one like that. We approach the conclusion. This is what V-shaped should be. I'm telling you, I was actually, generally speaking, pretty impressed with these. They didn't knock my socks off like, wow, they're the greatest audio product I've ever heard, but they are impressive. So, these things have some pretty beautiful bass as far as the response is concerned, without emphasizing the wrong portions that make it sound bloomy and muddy and disgusting. Airpods. They have a sparklish treble with a decent amount of control. There's never really any big peaks or any overemphasis in some areas that I would be concerned about. And the mids, they're not too great. They're a little recessed, but they're still acceptable. They still have surprising detail for what is a tiny wireless unit here. Does it have that Bluetooth sound, which is what I would describe as kind of sounding thin and paper-like, very mechanical, as opposed to an analog driver unit that is producing natural sound. These things these are heavily processed. There's some sound processing going on in here, but they kind of have to, just because, look at this thing. It's a tiny little audio product, and but it's an ever so slight amount of that Bluetooth noise. Is it enough for you to care? No, not really. See, if you're going to be out there, if you're going to be using these on the go for their purpose, which is to keep you mobile and to keep you wire free and to keep you, like I said, on the go without worrying too much about the audio source itself, just to let the tunes keep playing, you really shouldn't be concerned with these, because they're close enough to a natural sounding audio product where you won't have to worry about these sounding artificial or fake with the audio or cheap in any way. So, the problems. I can't ignore all of the connectivity issues. They rarely occur. It's not like they occur like every other time you connect them, but they do. They're not incredibly easy to ignore. They're things that happen. Even with the Dekoni Bulletz, they still slipped out of my ears personally. So I struggle with the earphones staying comfortably in. Unfortunately, that's just something I suffer from, which is why growing up, I pretty much had to stick to either ear hooks or earpods, which were nasty, but it's all I could really use because everything else just slipped out of my ears. So I just wanted to add to that. These things don't have a whole lot of support, and they're not going to stay incredibly well in your ears, especially if you're someone that suffers from that type of issue where they just slip out of your ears randomly for no reason. It's a great product. It is definitely riddled with a few tech-related issues here, not audio-related issues. And but if Apple can fix that issue and get these working and just have these be completely seamless and absolutely without any problems, they would be the probably one of the better wireless products on the market. No, in fact, they still are. I'm pretty sure these are one of the best truly wireless audio products on the market, and I really don't think otherwise. I really think they're pretty impressive. They'd be so much better if they didn't have those connectivity issues. So, coming up next, we're going to have the AirPods Gen 2, and I know it pains me. It pains me that I have to listen to those. But it's for the sake of audio. It's for the sake of finding the truth. It's for the sake of having a log in history on this channel and have it be known I own these I listened to these, and from what I listened to, these are my findings. So unfortunately, I have to do that. But yeah. So coming up next, AirPods Gen 2 review. Then AirPods versus AirPods Pro. Keep an ear out for that. Thank you for staying with me. Once again, we're not shifting over to mainstream consumer audio, but I just wanted to explore this field, see what it had to offer, see if it got any better as the time went by. And you know what? Just based off on these alone, yeah, it's just miles better than it was like 3 years ago when I was still scourging through Best Buy, 4 years ago. Trying to look for the latest and greatest Bluetooth product that sounded like, I don't know, Susvaras or something. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you for sticking with me. Don't forget to check out the Patreon. Links down below to the products. And don't forget to leave a comment if you have any questions about anything. That's going to do it for me. See you.